Morning, everybody. Morning. We're going to do 2 Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. It's in page 576 and 577 in your Pew Bible. Now, Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means, go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter, I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me?" When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do such great thing, would you have not done it? How much more then when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. Please accept now a gift from your servant."
Thank you, Alex. Anybody want to put a vote to Alex does all the scripture readings from now on? I mean, how do you follow that? I mean, that was pretty good. Let's have a quick moment of prayer here. Lord, thank you for gathering us here. Thank you for the health that we enjoy. Thank you for the comfort that we find in the death, burial, and resurrection of your Son. Thank you for your word. Thank you for our minds. Thank you for your patience as you teach us, Father. Lord, bless those on our hearts and on our minds. Be with Artie and his family. And bless us all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So as a way of opening, how about a joke?
Yeah.
So, my wife asked me to stop singing "I'm a Believer" by the Monkees. And at first I thought she was kidding. But then I saw her face. That's horrible. Alright, so, here's the sermon today. So as Alex just read, we saw this mighty man this general named Naaman, who conquered in battle, did all these great things. He gets leprosy. Pretty much a death sentence. So he finds out, hey, there's somebody in Israel might be able to heal me. So he takes all this money with him, all these big gifts, gets a letter from his king, goes down there, finds out the guy is Elijah, he goes to him. Elijah doesn't even give him the dignity of going out and meeting with him face to face. He sends a messenger. And the messenger says, go into the River Jordan. Go give yourself a little bath and you'll be fine. Has anybody seen the River Jordan? No. It's dirty. It's this muddy river. So what does the big general hotshot do? He's like, he throws a fit. And he says, don't you know who I am? I shouldn't be taking a bath in the Jordan. And then he, refers to these other glorious rivers. He goes, that's, where I should be. Or he says, how come I even need to do that? Why don't you just come out and wave your hands and, I'll be fine. And then it's his servants that have a little powwow with him. And they kind of get his head in the right spot. And he goes and does it, and he's healed. I love the Old Testament because whenever you read these historical accounts, it's like, wow, that's me. Because it's the story of all of us. We're all really holding on to that Naaman attitude. And for this discussion, this talk, it's really about obedience. The idea of submission. And I really want to break down the positive and negative in 3 different parts of the whole idea of obedience and submission. Because to start off with, right off the bat, in the first part, we view even the idea of obedience and submission really negatively. There's this pushback when you hear it, especially in our culture. We view obedience in relation to what? When you hear it. Do you get warm fuzzies when you hear obedience and submission? No, we kind of view it as somebody's been intimidated, somebody's been forced to do something against their will. It's an act which is contrary to their freedom. The person submitting must have a very weak will. It's even humiliating. We think about it. And the question is that kind of how Naaman viewed it? When the prophet sent him a message, hey, we're going to heal you, but you got to do this. Why did he have such a angry response to it? He didn't like the idea of obedience or submission. And to kind of help you here, this first positive is, biblically, is that really how obedience is offered in Scripture? And when we talk about obedience biblically, it's really a concept that's clustered tightly with the ideas of sacrifice, surrender, we said submission, and humility. And the important thing I really want you to focus in on as we talk about this is that cluster of ideas. Biblically speaking, whenever Jesus or God speaks about these are all internal acts of the will. None of it is external. Meaning when obedience is called upon, or submission or surrender, who's in control of that? Who's making the decision? Is it an external factor being forced upon you? Or is it something that you consent to? Something that can only happen when your internal will agrees to it. Think of Jesus in the garden, one of the most sublime acts of obedience that we've ever seen. Jesus, literally sweating blood, is talking to God. And his question wasn't, do I have to do it? His question was, can it be done any other way? God's answer wasn't, you have to do it. God's answer was, there's no other way to do it. Will you do it? And Jesus answered, yes. That's what makes it worthwhile, is because Jesus assented to it. Jesus was in the driver's seat. Jesus, it's a horrifying thought, but technically he could have said no. That's why the choice mattered. It's because he assented, because he said yes. This is why the later authors said Jesus was obedient even unto death, meaning he made that choice. Do you see the power in it now? You know, we've had studies where we've talked about meekness. What's the biblical concept of meekness? You know, it's not something celebrated in our culture. But think of a massive Clydesdale with this little thin rope around its head. This small little halter. That horse could break it at any moment. Its power under control is what meekness is. It's not putting down the individual. It's the individual controlling oneself, deciding with the will to surrender. Again, Jesus has a good view of this. If you look at John chapter 15, verse 15, easy one to remember, 15:15. I'm always blown away whenever I hear this. This is Jesus speaking on the night before he was to die. Even in the garden where he sweat the blood, he says, I no longer call you servants, speaking about us. Because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. So what's the distinction there? You're not just servants blindly obeying me out of fear or being forced to. But Jesus says, you're my friends. Why? Because you know what's being asked of you. You understand what I'm sharing with you. You're choosing to be here. Has anybody had a friend? I mean, when you hear that word, has anybody had a friend that they forced to be their friend? Friendships don't really work that way, do they? I mean, that's a stalker. You know, that's a crazy person. Or what about, a good, healthy marriage? You both got to be really consenting and involved and committed to it, right? That's the biblical concept of obedience and submission. It's not because you have to. Second one, look at this. And also, I just want to point in, it's relational, and it's also daily chosen. Paul really gets this point across that it's something we choose when he uses the analogy of every day I sacrifice myself on the altar. It's a daily choice to live a sacrificial life. It's not a one and done thing. It's something as we go through life, we choose consciously to do. And some days we do okay at it. Some days we do horrible. I'm not great at it. But it's a daily choice. You're in the driver's seat. That's the important part to understand. Second negative, in regard to these concepts, a negative we have, or something that hinders us with submission and obedience, is when we hear it, we view God as a tyrant. When you talk to people about obedience and submission to God, some have that reaction, well, that's just because God's a tyrant. or he's an intruder in our lives and our desires. You know, somebody said God is the great interrupter. He ruins the party. Let me read you, it's a really good quote which I've saved from a gentleman by the name of Aldous Huxley. He was kind of a brilliant author and intellectual, and he was really seated in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s with the intellectual elite. And this quote is from him when he was younger, kind of his rejection of God and those in the intellectual elite with him. And further on in his life, he had a large change of heart, and he had this to say about it. He said, "I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning, and consequently assumed that it had none, and was able without any difficulty to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. The philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with a problem in pure metaphysics. He is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to do. For myself, as no doubt for the most of my friends, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation from a certain system of morality. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom. The supporters of this system claimed that it embodied the meaning, the Christian meaning, they insisted, of the world. There was one admirably simple method of confuting these people and justifying ourselves in our erotic revolt. We would deny that the world had any meaning whatsoever." Now this is him looking back and realizing why he rejected God, why he had that bit of recoil at the thought of God's existence. What it meant was, if I'm to accept God, I got to give up something. I don't want to. So therefore, I'm going to construct a worldview where my sexual freedom is the core of it. And then we'll expand out from there. And it could be anything. Sexual freedom, pride, it's multifaceted with humans. But the amazing ability for us to construct rejection of God on those deep-seated desires are horrible. Did Naaman feel this way? The correct answer is yes. He was rejecting, if God is the healing in the story, why was he rejecting it at first? Because it meant that he had to give up some of his freedom. He had to go take a bath in a muddy river. He's a great person. He shouldn't need to do that. But what's the biblical view? See, the biblical view and concept is that God is a great liberator. God is the one who actually frees us. He desires to heal us. Think of this. I have an analogy. Maybe it'll help you. If it doesn't, like all analogies, just ignore it. Woman has lung cancer. She smoked all of her life. She's dying. A friend says, "Well, I know a surgeon that might be able to help you." Lady goes to surgeon. Talks with the surgeon. The surgeon says, "I can heal you." He goes, "I actually have a new method. I can actually grow new lungs for you. We can remove your old ones, and I can heal you. In fact, you'll be better than you were before." He goes, "But you're going to have to be put under for this operation. And you're going to have to trust me to tear out your old lungs and put in some new ones. And these new lungs, you won't be able to smoke anymore." Lady says, "Yeah, but I don't want to be put under. I don't want to stop smoking. I love smoking. And, kind of don't want you cutting me open." Surgeon says, "But I can heal you. I can make you better. I can fulfill you. Once it's over, you will be whole again." That's kind of the analogy of how God views us. The parable of the prodigal son. The father runs to the Son, to clean him, to heal him. You know, what does Jesus constantly ask? I mean, I always think about, do you want to be healed? Isn't that weird? Why would God ask if you want to be healed? Duh, yeah, I do. Well, it means something in that question. Because again, you're the one in the driver's seat. You're the one that says if you want to be healed or not. Did Naaman want to be healed? Yeah. And it's I kind of share that analogy because I'm horrified of being put under anesthesia. I just am. It's an irrational fear. You know, I talk about my wife about it all the time, and she's like, "Yeah, shut up, dummy." You know, because she's like, "It's nothing to be. It's great. The best rest you've ever had." You know, I got to get my wisdom teeth out. I got to get my sinuses worked on. But I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared to fly on a plane. It's stupid. But it's irrational. And that's not to say obedience and submission doesn't hurt. Because I keep in the analogy, the surgeon could have said, "Oh yeah, by the way, your recovery is going to be painful." Everybody heard of C.S. Lewis?
Yes.
Wonderful man. If I could pick a grandfather in the faith, that you know, my patron saint would be Saint Louis. Sounds weird. If you know about his life, brilliant man, professor at Oxford University, and he became a theist and then a Christian later on in his life. And he was pretty much one of the greatest tools the Lord's used in the 20th century to bring people Christianity around the globe. And his conversion story speaks to this pain. Because you see, he did not want God. When he was a professor at Oxford University, he speaks of the hound of heaven, like this dog that had been chasing him, which he'd been running from his entire life. And he speaks of the night when he finally gave up, and it was horribly painful, he says. In his words, he says, "You must picture me alone in that room in Magdalen, night after night, feeling whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him whom I so earnestly desired not to meet. That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me. In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God, and knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all of England. I did not then see what is now the most shining and obvious thing, the divine humility which will accept a convert even on such terms. The prodigal son, at least, walked home on his own feet. But who can duly adore that love which will open the high gates to a prodigal who was brought in kicking, struggling, resentful, and darting his eyes in every direction, hoping for an escape? The words compel intrare, compel them to come in, have been so abused by wicked men that we shudder at them. But properly understood, they plumb the depth of the divine mercy. The hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men, and his compulsion is our liberation. It's not pie in the sky, comfy rainbows, submitting, or being obedient, or making that choice. C.S. Lewis gets that point across. It hurts. It's painful. Again, think of Jesus in the garden. It tears at you to give it up, to surrender, and to sit down and say, God is God. And finally, the third one I have here, we view this surrender as losing ourselves, as if it's all about God and we're merely here for his enjoyment, and he's like checking off, I got another win, yay. You know, that's a bad conception of God. It's a jaded view. Because surrender, when we surrender, whose benefit is it for? It's for us. I heard that. That's good. Can God change? Little theology class here. Can God's nature change? No. Nothing about God can change. Can we change? Yes. So even though God desires that relationship with us, who's benefiting from it? We are. And this goes to our understanding who God is. Because God lacks nothing. We don't bring anything to him to the table. Well, then somebody asks, well, why would God want to benefit us? He loves us. And it's also because God, it's not just because he loves us, but because God is love. God is the good. God doesn't just do good things. He's literally the good. Teens, what does it mean to be good? What is goodness?
All which corresponds to God's nature.
I'm a good teacher. Did you hear that? She gave the right answer. She said, anything that corresponds to God's nature. Meaning, whenever you see something that's good or we do something that's good, we say, does it match God? You see, God does goodness naturally. And his goodness is for us to be obedient, to submit, because we benefit from it. Again, I'm going to go to C.S. Lewis here. We're going to finish off with this. And this is from his book called The Great Divorce. Now, if you've read this, you probably know where I'm going with this. But just to give you a bit of a concept, C.S. Lewis wrote fiction stories. So what he's saying is, and this isn't, sound theology, but he writes a fiction story like the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and he teaches theological truths in the story. So in The Great Divorce, a group from hell go on a field trip to heaven to see what it's all about. And the group from hell, they're kind of these oily ghosts, unsubstantial things. And heaven's the real world, they find out. So listen to this. I saw coming towards us a ghost who carried something on his shoulder. Like all the ghosts, he was unsubstantial. But they differed from one another as smokes differ. Some had been whitish, this one was dark and oily. What sat on his shoulder was a little red lizard, and it was twitching its tail like a whip and whispering things in his ear. As we caught sight of him, he turned his head to the reptile with a snarl of impatience. "Shut up, I tell you," he said. It wagged its tail and continued to whisper to him. He ceased snarling and presently began to smile. Then he turned and started to limp westward, away from the mountains. "Off so soon?" said a voice. The speaker was more or less human in shape, but larger than a man, and so bright that I could hardly look at him. His presence smote on my eyes and on my body too, for there was a heat coming from him as well as a light, like the morning sun at the beginning of a tyrannous summer day. "Yes, I'm off," said the ghost. "Thank you for your hospitality, but it's no good, you see. I told this little chap," here he indicated the lizard, "that he'd have to be quiet if he came, which he insisted on doing. Of course, this stuff won't do here, I realize that, but he won't stop. I just have to go home." "Would you like me to make him go quiet?" said the flaming spirit, an angel as I now understood. "Of course I would," said the ghost. "Then I will kill him," said the angel, taking a step forward. "Oh, look out. You're telling me, you're burning me. Keep away," said the ghost, retreating. "Don't you want him killed?" said the angel. "You didn't say anything about killing him at first. I hardly meant to bother you with anything so drastic as that." "It's the only way," said the angel, whose burning hands were now very close to the lizard. "Shall I kill it?" "Well, that's a further question. I'm quite open to consider it, but it's a new point, isn't it? I mean, for the moment I was only thinking about silencing it, because up here, well, it's just so damned embarrassing." "May I kill it?" "Well, there's time to discuss that later." "There is no time. May I kill it?" "Honestly, I don't think that's the slightest necessary thing for that. I'm sure I shall be able to keep it in order now, I think the gradual process would be a little bit better than killing it. The gradual process is of no use at all. Don't you think so? Well, I think over what you've said very carefully. I honestly will. In fact, I'd let you kill it now, but a matter of fact, I'm not feeling frightfully well today. It would be most silly to do it now. I'd need to be in good health for the operation some other day, perhaps. There is no other day, said the angel. Get back, you're burning me. How can I tell you to kill it? You'd kill me if you did. It's not so. Why, you're hurting me now. I never said it wouldn't hurt you. I said it wouldn't kill you. Oh, I know, you think I'm a coward, but it isn't that. Really, it isn't that, I say. Let me run back by tonight's bus and get an opinion from my own doctor. I'll come again the first moment I can. This moment contains all moments. Why are you torturing me? You're jeering at me. How can I let you tear me in pieces? If you wanted to help me, why didn't you kill the damn thing without asking me before I knew about it? I cannot kill it against your will. It is impossible. Have I your permission? The angel's hands were almost closed on the lizard, but not quite. Then the lizard began chattering to the ghost so loud that even I could hear what he was saying. Be careful, it said. He can do what he says. He can kill me. One fatal word from you and he will. Then you'll be without me forever and ever. It's not natural. How could you live? You'd be only a sort of ghost, not a real man as you are now. He doesn't understand. He's only a cold, bloodless, abstract thing. It may be natural for him, but it isn't for us. I'll be so good. I admit I've sometimes gone too far in the past, but I promise I won't do it again. I'll give you nothing but really nice dreams, all sweet and fresh. You might say quite innocent. Have I your permission? Said the angel. I know it will kill me, said the ghost. It won't, but suppose it did. You're right. It'd be better to be dead than to live with this creature anymore. Then I may. Damn and blast you. Go on. Get it over. Do what you like. Then the ghost began to whimper. God help me. God help me. Next moment, the ghost gave a scream of agony such I've never heard on earth. The burning one closed his crimson grip on the reptile, twisted it, while it bit and writhed and flung it, broken back on the turf. The ghost gasped, reeling backwards, and fell. For a moment, I could make nothing distinctly. Then I saw between me and the nearest bush, unmistakably solid but growing every moment solider, the upper arm and the shoulder of a man. Then brighter still and stronger, the legs and the hands. The neck and the golden head materialized while I watched. And if my attention had not wavered, I should have seen the actual completing of a man. An immense man, not much smaller than the angel. What distracted me was the fact that at the same moment something seemed to be happening to the lizard. At first, I thought the operation had failed. So far from dying, the creature was still struggling and even growing bigger. It changed. Its hind parts grew rounder. The tail, still flickering, became a tail of hair that flickered between huge and glossy buttocks. Suddenly, I startled back, rubbing my eyes. What stood before me was the greatest stallion I had ever seen. Silvery white, but with mane and tail. The new-made man turned and clapped the new horse's neck. It nosed his bright body. Horse and master breathed into each other's nostrils. The man turned from it, flung himself at the feet of the burning one, and embraced him. When he rose, I thought his face shone with tears, but it may have only been the liquid love and brightness that one cannot distinguish in this country. I had not long to think about it. Turning his seat, he waved a farewell, then nudged the stallion with his heels. They were off before I knew what was happening. There it was riding, if you like. Do you understand all that has happened, my son? Said the teacher. I don't know about all, sir, I said. Am I right in thinking that the lizard really turned into a horse? Aye, but it was killed first. You won't forget that part, will you? I'll try not to, sir. But does that mean that everything that is in us can go on to the mountains? Nothing, not even the best and the noblest, can go on as it is now. Nothing, not even what is lowest and most bestial, will not be raised again if it submits to death. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. Flesh and blood can come to the mountains, not because they are too rank, but because they are too weak. What is a lizard compared with a stallion? Lust is a poor, weak, whimpering, whispering thing compared with that richness and energy of desire which will arise when lust has been killed. Kind of a lengthy read, but do you understand the moral of the story? Like, we all kind of feel like we're broken. We understand our hang-ups. We understand our own fears. We understand the things that we continue to turn back to. The lizard on our shoulder. And the angel of God continually saying, may I kill it? And the ghost goes through all the excuses that it has. The fear, the rejection, the running away. And finally, in a moment of pain, it falls to the ground, says, God help me, please kill it. So in closing, I just want you to think about that. What's your view on obedience and submission? It's a powerful thing that you can choose to do. God wants to heal you, but God won't. Because God has decided that if he's to truly enjoy a loving relationship with his creation, they must have free will. And we must make the choice. If you need help in responding to the gospel call, please do so now as we come and stand and sing.